The $8,000 rule, the number that quietly controls your entire financial life. You don't notice the number at first because it doesn't look important. It doesn't sound powerful, and it definitely doesn't feel like something that could change your entire financial life. It's not $1 million. It's not even 6 figures. It's small enough to ignore and simple enough to misunderstand. And that is exactly why almost nobody pays attention to it until it's too late. I didn't take it seriously either. The first time I heard it from someone who had already solved the problem I was still trying to figure out. He wasn't flashy. He didn't talk about money like it was a game. And nothing about his lifestyle looked like what social media tells you wealth should look like. But he had something that mattered more than appearance. He had control, and that control came from understanding one number. That number was $8,000, and at first I thought it was random, something personal to him, something that worked in his situation but wouldn't apply to mine. I laughed it off in the moment because it didn't feel impressive enough to be real. But then he started explaining it in a way that made me realize I had been thinking about money completely wrong. He said every major financial mistake people make can be traced back to not respecting that number at the right time. He said every major financial win starts once you cross it and understand what it actually does. And the more he talked, the more I realized that this wasn't about money, it was about behavior. Because money is not just numbers in an account, it is a system of decisions, and decisions are influenced by pressure. And pressure is highest when you don't have enough space to think clearly. That space, he said, starts at $8,000. Level 1, the cost of not having enough. Most people think being broke just means having less money, but that is not what actually happens in real life. Being broke is not neutral, it is expensive in ways that are invisible when you are inside it. And the worst part is you don't even realize how much you are losing. When you don't have a cash buffer, every small problem turns into a bigger one because you cannot respond to it early. You delay decisions, you avoid fixes, and you choose the cheapest option instead of the smartest one. And over time, those decisions stack up into something much more costly than the original problem. A simple car repair becomes a major breakdown because you waited too long. A minor health issue becomes an emergency because you didn't handle it early. A cheap purchase becomes a repeated expense because it doesn't last. These are not rare events. They are normal parts of life that everyone experiences. The difference is not whether they happen. The difference is how you respond to them. And your response is controlled by how much financial space you have. Below a certain point, you are not making decisions. You are reacting. You are solving problems in the moment instead of preventing them in advance. And reacting is always more expensive than preparing. This is what people mean when they talk about the hidden cost of being broke, but they rarely explain it clearly. It is not just about low income. It is about constant financial pressure forcing you into bad decisions. And those decisions create a cycle that is very hard to break. Level 2, WHY $8,000, changes everything. At around $8,000 in liquid cash, something subtle but powerful starts to change. You are still not rich, you are not even comfortable yet, but you are no longer desperate. And that difference changes how you think. Instead of asking what you can afford right now, you start asking what makes the most sense long term. Instead of choosing based on urgency, you start choosing based on logic. And logic leads to better outcomes. You fix problems early instead of waiting for them to grow. You avoid high-interest debt because you don't need it to survive. You make decisions from a position of control instead of pressure. This is why $8,000 matters so much, not because of the amount itself, but because of what it removes. It removes the urgency that forces bad decisions. And without urgency, you can finally think clearly. It is not exciting. It is not impressive, and it does not make you feel wealthy, but it is the point where you stop losing money without realizing it. And stopping the loss is the first step to building anything real. Level 3, the foundation. Most people skip the biggest mistake people make is trying to build wealth without first building stability. They jump into investing, side hustles, and complex strategies without fixing the base. And without a base, everything they build is unstable. You cannot invest confidently if every unexpected expense forces you to sell. You cannot take risks if one mistake could wipe you out. And you cannot think long-term if you are constantly dealing with short-term problems. $8,000 is not the goal, it is the starting line. It is the point where you create a foundation strong enough to support everything else. And without it, progress is always temporary. Think of it like building a house. You don't start with the roof. You pour the foundation first, even though nobody sees it. Because without it, nothing else will hold. Most people ignore this step because it is boring. It does not feel like progress. It does not look impressive, and it takes time. But skipping it guarantees failure later. Level 4, the card decision that defines your future. One of the fastest ways to destroy your financial progress is buying a car that does not match your financial position. It feels normal, it feels deserved, and it feels like a reward. But it is often the opposite. Cars are not just purchases. They are long-term financial commitments. They lose value over time, they require maintenance, and they tie up money that could be growing elsewhere. And most people underestimate that impact. The difference between an $8,000 car and a $30,000 car is not just $22,000 today. It is what that $22,000 could become if invested over time. That difference compounds into something much larger. Over 20 years, that gap can turn into well over $100,000, not because of anything complicated, but because of consistency and time. And that is what most people sacrifice without realizing it. Driving a cheaper car is not about deprivation, it is about prioritization. It is choosing long-term growth over short-term comfort. And that decision alone can change your financial trajectory. Level 5, the investment floor that actually works. Saving money is important, but investing is what creates growth. And the key is not just investing, it is investing enough for the math to work. Because below a certain level, the results are not meaningful. $8,000 per year is not an arbitrary number. It is the point where compounding starts to matter. It is where your contributions and the market's growth begin to create real momentum. And that momentum builds over time. At that level, you are not relying only on your income. You are building a system that works even when you are not actively earning. And that is what creates long-term stability. The challenge is not earning more, it is allocating differently. Most people already have the money. They are just spending it in ways that do not create future value. And redirecting that money changes everything. Level 6, the spending trap that scales with you. As income increases, spending usually follows. It happens gradually, almost invisibly, through small upgrades and conveniences. And over time, those small changes create a much larger financial commitment. The problem is not spending more. The problem is spending more without understanding what it requires long term. Because every increase in monthly spending raises the amount you need to sustain it. And that number grows quickly. At a certain point, your lifestyle becomes expensive enough that it locks you into working longer than you planned. Not because you want to, but because you have to. And most people realize this too late. Controlling spending is not about restriction, it is about awareness. It is understanding the long-term cost of short-term decisions and making choices that keep your options open. Level 7, the test that prevents bad decisions. Before making any major financial upgrade, there is a simple test that reveals whether it is truly affordable. Instead of committing immediately, you simulate the cost first, and you observe the impact. If you want to spend more, start saving that amount instead. Do it consistently for months, and see if it affects your ability to maintain your other goals. If it does, the upgrade is not as safe as it seems. If it doesn't, you have proven that you can handle it, and that proof is more valuable than any assumption. This test removes emotion from the decision. It replaces guessing with evidence, and it protects you from making commitments that look fine in theory, but fail in reality. Level 8. The system that never breaks. At the end of everything, the system is simple. One number applied in different ways at different stages, and each application solves a specific problem. $8,000 as a buffer creates stability. $8,000 as a limit protects your growth. $8,000 as an investment builds your future. $8,000 as a ceiling controls your lifestyle. And $8,000 as a test protects your decisions. It is not complicated, but it requires discipline. And discipline is what most people avoid. Ending. Why simple rules? When the people who succeed financially are not always the smartest, they are the most consistent. They follow simple rules, and they do not break them. Complex strategies fail because they rely on perfect execution. Simple systems work because they are easy to follow repeatedly, and repetition is what creates results. $8,000 is not magic, it is just a clear boundary. But sometimes, one clear boundary is all you need to change everything.